Hi, I'm Dr. Montagna. I'm going to talk about a subject here that a little bit uncomfortable, but it's a very important one for anybody with chronic illness. We're going to talk about poop. Bowel habits, basically, is what they are. Our bowel habits are extremely vitally important. Until we get these working in a healthy manner, we cannot heal. It's that critically important. Bowel habits and making them normal is really the first stage that we look at with anybody with any kind of a chronic problem that's going on. Any type of help and care cannot go forward until these are normalized. So when we start looking at bowel habits, our elimination is how we get rid of toxins. It's a very simple process when it works properly. Everyone who has some chronic complaint, chronic type of an illness, some ongoing symptoms are going on, they have some type of toxicity going on in their body, and their bowel habits need to allow them to eliminate their toxins. Pretty much that simple in the way to look at things. So there's a few things about bowel habits that are really, really important. What is normal? We really can't measure by our own normal. When we look at societies that don't have any incident of gastrointestinal disease, they all have normal bowel habits of 3 to 5 times a day. So if 3 to 5 times a day makes it so that someone in their society doesn't get any gastrointestinal complaints or diseases, that's a pretty good measurement of what normal should be in any culture. Just because it's not in our culture doesn't mean that it's good for us. And there's a few things that make up the stools that we produce, the poop that we put out. There's fiber in those stools. The cells that line our gut should divide and replace themselves every 24 hours. So you have the cells that line your gut, those make up part of your stools, and there's a bacterial coating called the flora that makes up a significant amount, and then there's undigested food particles, along with a little bit of water. The bugs that are inside of our gut, those will either eat and drink our poop, and they will excrete nutrients, or they will take our nutrients and excrete toxins. So the health of the bacterial coating called the flora, the microbiota, is critically and vitally important. When we start to look at medicine, this is Dale Breedston. He's a medical doctor. He got Clinical Researcher of the Month in looking at some different things. And in his article that he presented, he makes this statement: what you choose to treat, talking of doctors, what you choose to treat may not be as important as what you fail to include. And this is the reality of virtually everybody with chronic illness. Their clinicians and whoever they're trying to seek care from are failing to be able to include all the parameters to allow them to get to heal. This is one of the key ones. This is fairly obvious right here. There is such a high incidence of constipation in the chronically ill. It's part of the reason why they remain ill. There's it's almost 30% of people just in our society, 29.5% of people complain of some level of constipation. This is what an extremely severe case of constipation looks like. This is a megacolon. This is some diagnostic imaging of somebody's abdomen. And all that dark speckly stuff, that's an impacted colon. It gives no room for, or virtually hardly any room for all the rest of the organs. The impacted fecal matter in the colon takes up the lion's share of the abdomen. This is over 3/4 of the abdomen is filled with fecal matter. That person has to be quite sick. When we start looking at the time it takes for poop to go through us, it's really important to know this. Normally, it should be 14 to 18 hours from mouth to toilet. That's all. If it's going 14 to 18 hours, we're probably digesting fairly healthy. If it's taking longer than that, we will either digest our food, ferment our food, or rot our food. If it's taking too long to go through, it's either fermenting or rotting. If it's fermenting, the odors start to change. You can start to get sweet types of smells coming through there. Commonly you get mucus that comes out with the stools. It's not good. And if it's rotting, it smells so bad it chases everybody out of the room. The people with rotting fecal matter are the people with a Glade air freshener on the back of their toilet. That cannot be healthy at all. Typically, it's about a minute or so in the mouth. We should chew our food to liquid. That starts the digestive juices moving everywhere where it needs. It's only a few seconds in swallowing. Time in the stomach depends on what it is. Liquids, maybe 20 minutes. Proteins, 2 to 4 hours. Oils can be longer than that. Once it goes out of the stomach, it's maybe 3 to 5 hours in small intestine, and it's 9 hours or more in the colon. So on the short side, that's 14 hours. Long side should be 18. Years ago, heard of somebody who had an ex that went once every 2 to 3 weeks. That person came in and we started working with them. They got giddy. Their whole life changed when they got to 3 bowel habits a day. It completely changed their life. The worst case scenario we saw was a person who went once every 5 to 6 weeks. Once again, when that person got to 3 times a day, their whole life changed. They got giddy and they started to heal up. This is a really big thing. So when we start looking at the different forms of stools, it tells a lot about what's going on. The hard round balls, when they're individual, too long a transit time, too little fiber in the diet. When those hard round balls start to pack together and make lumpy looking stools, transit time still too long, they're dehydrating too much, probably still too little of fiber. Those can become more formed with cracked edges, too long a transit time, too dehydrated. Smooth edges, round logs, that's typically a healthy transit time. When those start to break up, be smooth but broken in pieces, the transit time tends to be a little too short. Ragged edges is way too fast, and liquid is extremely too fast. When we start looking at the color of the stools, the bile is what gives our stools the color. That's where the brown colors come from the light tan to the dark chocolate. That typically comes from bile, and what the pigment in the bile is called bilirubin. It's from the breakdown of the red blood cells released in our hemoglobin, which is getting regenerated inside of your body. So brown is fairly normal. When it's green, there's too much bile being produced and going into the gut, and it doesn't have anything to work against. That'll tend to make the stools green. If the stools are yellow, clay-colored, gray-colored, if they sink, they're probably fairly decent. That's usually a lack of bile going on, and there could be a few reasons why that is the case. If they float, that can be some pathology that's going on with the gallbladder and the ducts that enters into the small intestine with, called the common bile duct. It can be some problems in that. If it's floats and stinky, then we have some serious maldigestive problems that really need to be looked at. If it's black, there's a couple different causes for black stools. One is really low quality iron supplements. like iron sulfate. That's really common and causes constipation, black tarry stools. Bismuth, like in Pepto-Bismol, that'll cause black stools also. If the stool starts to get sticky and tarry, that's usually from blood, bleeding going on up higher, and that really needs to be looked at as the cause of what is creating that. In the consistency, it tells a story also. When it's smooth, it's fairly normal. When we have hard balls, the transit time is too slow, low fiber intake, and dehydrated. So increasing water intake, increasing fiber intake can have a lot to do to help this. And by the way, fiber, the healthiest fiber we can have is vegetable matter. It's not grains. Vegetable matter will help increase and normalize our bowel habits way, way more than the irritation caused by the fiber in whole grains. If we start to see food particles, that's usually a sign of too low a stomach acid and or not enough digestive enzymes. The too low a stomach acid can be addressed several different ways. Chewing your food to liquid is one of the ways where we start the production of the stomach acid. That's pretty huge. Digestive enzymes are available out there also. Those should be really matched to people's needs. Ragged edges in the stools, typically too fast a transit time, which is a good point to say right here. If it comes out smooth and solid but falls apart once it hits the water in the toilet, that still can be fairly normal. If it's real watery, the transit time's too fast, and that's usually a sign of bowel irritation, could be a sign of parasites. Both those need to be looked at to see why that is the case. The odor, if it's offensive at all, the stools are toxic, the transit time's too slow, and that needs to change. If the odor is mild and not offensive, it's pretty normal. The coatings on the outside, if there's mucus on the coating, there's a lot of gut irritation, maybe an overgrowth of yeast that's going on. Both of those are pretty common. If there's blood that you can see on the outside, that's usually hemorrhoids. And those hemorrhoids can be in the opening, outside of the opening, or just inside the opening. If you get blood on toilet paper and on the outside of stools, that's usually hemorrhoids. Those may need to be looked at also. If it's blood higher up, it usually causes black tarry stools. That needs to be looked at also. If you start to see strings on the outside of your stools, first more common thing is toilet paper balls from wiping. But it can also be a sign of parasites. Should be looked at with that. And ropey externals, there's a fair amount of press out there about rope parasites. We had somebody who had been going to the medical doctor with that complaint for quite a while, and the medical doctor didn't understand what that was. After working with him for a bit, we found out in this case it was because the person had severe food intolerances that were burning the lining of his colon, and he was shedding the whole lining of his colon, much like a snake sheds its skin. It was trapping fecal matter inside of it. It was huge. Once we identified those food intolerances and got him to quit taking those substances, that completely went away. The gut healed up, and they're doing a whole bunch better. So if you like this video, hit the like down below. We'll be back with more videos on interesting subjects on keys to get people healthy.